hello to all of those who follow us and participate on Zoom, to those who follow us on our website, www.pressclub.ch, and also on our YouTube channel or Facebook or Twitter. It's a pleasure to have here this panel, and also on an online panel, a hybrid panel, I would say, to talk about a crucial subject and very actual subject. It's the illegal surveillance of journalists and others too. And we will focus this afternoon especially on what's called the Catalangate. And for this, I don't make a much longer introductory speech. I will give right away the floor to Carlos Castilla. Carlos Castilla is responsible from the Institute of Human Rights of Catalonia. It's written in Catalan, so I prefer not to say in Catalan, but I leave that to you. And Carlos, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Institut de Drets Humans de Catalunya, Institute of Human Rights of Catalonia, I thank you for your presence in this event parallel to the 50th session of United Nations Human Rights Council, especially those two who represent the missions, the permanent missions and the special procedures of the system of human rights. But thank you to all for coming to this call. I also make a special thanks to Omnium Civil Rights Europe for everything they have done to make this side event. In the Institute of Human Rights of Catalonia, in the last year, we have developed research in relation of the new technologies and human rights, placing special emphasis on some effects and use of artificial intelligence. First, due to a need in our environment, Catalonia has positioned itself in recent years as one of the places with more developments in artificial intelligence are being made. Given this, we could not be simple observers, less when privacy, the use of data, freedom of expression, or equality are being affected. Second, because reality has suppressed theory. As is publicly known, and we are here for that reason, civil society organizations in Catalonia, such as Omnium, but journalists, lawyers, and other activists in human rights, have been illegally monitored by means for spy software that, in principle, is only sold to state institutions. You know, the Pegasus. Given this, we could not let this not to be known by the United Nations Human Rights Council for all the impacts it generates on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. So, here we are. From the Institute of Human Rights of Catalonia, we start from the basis that the technology is not bad, nor is good in itself for human rights. But the process of creation, the design, as well the use, application, effects, and results the technology can have is what can have a negative impact on the human rights when they exclude, restrict, discriminate, nullify, violate, reduce, inhibit the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Illegal surveillance through any technology undoubtedly negative impacts on the human rights. For that reason, today we have 5 people invited to analyze the effects of illegal sorry, this is a word difficult for me, surveillance from 5 angles. But also to denounce this is happening in Catalonia, as before in Mexico and other countries. This is not normal, less for human rights. How maybe you know, but I don't know if I prefer to put the point in this. Citizen Lab, as a prestigious interdisciplinary laboratory at the University of Toronto, identified almost 65 people that was intervening in their privacy. This case, known as the Catalangate case, is the largest case of illegal cyber espionage ever certificated in Europe and in the world. Espionage affects 65 people linked to the independent movement, including civil society, politicians, activists, lawyers, journalists, and relatives. For that reason, we are here, and we have 5 persons. I don't know if the connection is well with all the people. We have in first, okay. We have in the first participation is of Jordi Cuixart from Omnium Civil Rights Europe, and for the general organization of this side event, each one will have 10 minutes in a first round, then 5 minutes to reply or comment or something from the other presentations. We can start. Please, Jordi.
Bonjour tout le monde. Merci beaucoup à le Club Suisse de la Presse pour on peut être ici pour faire cet événement que pour nous c'est très important. Aussi, buenas noches a los compañeros que están conectados en Latinoamérica y que por lo tanto somos conscientes de que estáis quitando horas de sueño. Merci beaucoup, thank you so much, muchas gracias, muchas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros en este acontecimiento muy importante. So, also before to start, let me also recognize as a cultural organization that this morning, if I'm not wrong, was in the same place the one press conference asking who will end the impunity regarding the Shirin Abu Akleh, who was killed she was killed by the Israeli army. And once again, what we want to denounce here is that to defend the human rights, even in Israel, in Palestine, in the Catalan countries, even in the rest of the world, it's so important. And this is the reason why we always consider that we are together in the same cause. So let's explain a little bit what means the Catalangate and how it affects to the democracy and the freedom of speech. So probably the Catalangate is the largest case of illegal cyber espionage ever certified in Europe and the world. Today we are talking about 65 people, espionage linked mainly with the independence movement or in favor of self-determination of Catalonia, including also civil society, politicians, activists, lawyers, journalists, and so on. So the victims also includes the last 3 presidents of the Catalan government, so means that the current and the previous presidents of the Parliament of Catalonia, members of the European Parliament, dozens of other politicians, senior officials, members of social society organizations, journalists. So means that it's not only against politicians or it's not only against activists, means that it's a global cause. So we received this international certification, as Carlos explained very well, from the Citizen Lab. Citizen Lab is a very prestigious interdisciplinary laboratory at the University of Toronto. Released this forensic report last April, and it has also been verified by Amnesty International, so means that the prestigious NGO who works for the human rights over the world. And it was also published in the prestigious American magazine, The New Yorker. So means who leaded this publication was Ronan Farrow, who was also Pulitzer Prize winning. So means that from our point of view, there is no doubt that we are talking about a very serious and a very big issue. So the use of Pegasus against the Catalan citizens traveling or living abroad has been documented in 4 different European countries. That means Belgium, France, Germany, and also Switzerland, where we have 2 persons exiled by the political events that occurs in the 1st of October in 2017 in Catalonia. So also affects to these 2 persons. And as Citizen Lab says in its report, strong circumstantial evidence points to a strong nexus with one or more Spanish government entities. So means in fact that Pegasus software can only be purchased by states. And it has been reported that in 2014, the Spanish police in charge of political espionage negotiated with an Israeli partner company called NSO, creator of Pegasus, to acquire this spyware for mobile phones. So means also a former NSO employee confirmed that the Spain has been using this spyware since 2015. So for the information of the rest of the people who is listening us, in 2012 we started a big demonstration in Catalonia in support of the right of self-determination. So means that from our point of view, this is a global scandal that confirms that Spain has a flawed democracy. And from our point of view also, which is the pending questions for Spain. So the Spanish government has a knowledge that its National Intelligence Center has spied on 18 of the 65 people, including lawyers, including civil society, including members and politicians. And the espionage recognized by the CNI is completely outside the international law. So it is based on prospective research that under international law is not legitimate, proportionate, or necessary and violates human rights. So on the other hand, no one has yet a knowledge about the surveillance of the other 47 victims, starting with who authorized it and also for which and what reasons they do this. So in fact, it is obvious that the uncontrolled deployment of these tools by states does not meet the test of necessity, proportionality, and legitimacy purpose as set by international standards. So the Spanish authorities have not yet responded to any of the disturbing questions raised by recent revelations. For example, for what reason did these people spy? When and for how long? Who bought the spyware? Who has access to the information, extracted? And who used it and how used this information? And also where this information is stored. So it means for Omnium Cultural, who was also being a victim of this outright espionage, we as a social society, as a civil society organization created in 1962, that currently right now we has about 90,000 members and which does not receive public funds, it means that for us there is no any reason that we must be spied. So we work for culture, we work for social cohesion and civil rights, and my inner circle also has been spied on from 2015 to 2022. I was the president of Omnium Cultural and I was in prison between 2017 and 2022 for exercising this right to the freedom of speech and also for defending the exercising or human rights to peaceful demonstration. So we know that it was during this period that the software works, for example, on my wife's mobile phone. She's also a journalist. And 3 members of the board of Omnium Cultural, the vice president, Marcel Mauri, who was the main authority during my imprisonment process, and also Elena Jimenez Botias, who is in charge of the international relationships with the institutional relationships in the international area. So it means that what we are quite sure that what they try to do is to know exactly what was not my opinion as a Jordi Cuixart, my opinion as a president, and for sure what was the next steps that I proposed to the organization to do from the jail. So it means that this is also, again, a huge violation of the human rights, mainly because it's a very honor for me, but that's true that I was considered to be a human rights defender by the Council of Europe and for different international bodies and human rights international NGOs, asked for my immediate release as the United Nations Working Group, the different United Nations Special Rapporteurs, Amnesty International, Organisation OMCT, L'Organisation Mondiale contre la Torture, and also frontline defenders between others. So it means that for us, the most important thing is to know why did they spy on us, and it's obvious that there was an intention behind this espionage, but we want to know exactly every step that they use against us in order to have a privileged information. So our main goal, let's say, our main job that we want to do is we follow with the following steps. In terms of to know exactly what happens in terms of the European Union. Have no sense that today, for example, we contacted with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, as well as other members of the European Parliament Commission, in order to ask them how they want to work on this case, because that's true that the European Parliament decided to open this inquiry about the case of Hungary or in terms of Poland, but not in terms of Spain. So it means that we want to push as well as possible them, because they must decide to also open an investigation with the Spanish authority. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Ja m'ho pots dir abans. At the United Nations, for example, also we sent several letters to the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Madame Michelle Bachelet, to ask her to act in order to know and to demand to Spain to stop this illegal surveillance and terminate for any existing contact with NSO organization, and also to repair the victim of the Catalangate and to reform the necessary laws to protect the society from the human rights. So we made also an oral statement through our international network, Ellen, at the interactive debate with the SR on Peaceful Assembly in the Human Rights, and also we contacted with the Council of Europe in order to know how the group of deputies who are analyzing the problems that Pegasus espionage generate wants to work in terms of the Catalangate. So also the legal battle, it's an important battle for us, so means Omnium has filed a criminal complaint against the NSO group and against any Spanish government agency that participate in perpetrating this crime. And today we know that a court in Barcelona has admitted the first complaint about this illegal espionage. So for us, it is not normal in a full democracy that the civil society members who were illegally spied on are the only ones pushing towards clarifying the facts, while the governments violate international treaties that force them to investigate. And not only that, the government justified this illegal espionage against democratic mobilization, as the Spanish defense minister did in the Spanish parliament, that he feels that he doesn't do any strange thing. So what we want to know exactly is who commissioned it and who paid for the illegal espionage and which state agencies took advantage of it. We have called of European investigation in order to clarify the funding and determine the criminal responsibilities of this case. At this moment, the prosecutor is putting a lot of obstacles, once again, in the way, and although we do not trust in the Spanish judiciary system, but it's a path that we must follow if we want to initiate international procedures. So Òmnium Cultural also has explained the case around Catalonia and the Catalan countries with local events and street actions, such as fixing posters about the Catalangate and so on. Òmnium has also provide tools to the civil society to protect themselves from the espionage in Spain. And on the Catalangate website, we have published a manual with basic tips to improve control on privacy and security on your mobile phone and computer. So other possible things that we would like to do will appear on the news in the near future. So as a summary, and I don't know if I am time or not, but in a real democracy, a case like this will have provoked an independent investigation, a commission of inquiry, and an assumption of responsibilities by the perpetrators. Spain today has not doing nothing. So the measures announced by the President Sanchez do not guarantee that this very serious event will not happen again. And unfortunately, Spain has not done anything and will not do it. Illegal espionage against dissidents it's a pity, but illegal espionage against dissidents will continue in Spain for the near future. So it is very serious for us that the Socialist Party has vetoed a commission of inquiry in the Spanish parliament along with the conservative, the right, and also, and once again, with the extreme right. So means that for all this, we will continue to denounce this case and demand responsibilities on all necessary fronts so that this case, which could have happened to any of us, does not go unpunished. So we demand justice, transparency, and also responsibilities, not only against the Spanish government, also against the international community. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jordi. Well, I have to say we have to make some change in the presentations. Unfortunately, the pandemic continues and two of the speakers can be here, but well, online is the connection, and maybe one more is some problems with connection. I don't know, but well, yeah, okay. Well, the next presentation is from David Oliva from Frontline Defenders. He will talk about the effects of surveillance on civil society and human rights defenders. Thank you so much, David, because it's very, very early in Guatemala, and thank you for your presence in this side event. The floor is yours, David.
Thank you, Carlos. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. My name is David Oliva. I work as a digital coordinator of security for Frontline Defenders in the Americas, and I have been working in digital protections since 10 or 12 years ago, and with Frontline since 2014. I'm based in Guatemala, so I will try to read some of the things that we as Frontline Defenders consider important. Frontline Defenders is deeply concerned about the increasing use of surveillance technology created by private companies, by governments to target, intimidate, and retaliate against human rights defenders, and the impunity faced by these companies for the negative human rights impact of their products and services. In November of 2021, the UN General Assembly's Third Committee adopted a resolution on providing a safe and enabling environment for human rights defenders and ensuring their protection, which, among other recommendations, call on states to refrain from using surveillance technologies to target human rights defenders. Frontline Defenders welcomes this call and urges the states to go even further and immediately institute a moratorium on the sale of surveillance technology until proper oversight and safeguards can be established. Think about pictures, voice notes, chats, emails, file attachments, health information, financial reports, calendar appointments, linked to meetings, etc. All of these are just an example of the personal data that surveillance tools like Pegasus weaponize at the moment they have access to our mobile devices. They can read, copy, or modify our personal information, but also, and more concerning, they have full access in real time to our cameras, microphones, location, and biometric sensors. Through that, surveillance or personal information is transformed into the most efficient and lasting technology espionage tool. It is notably alarming when this kind of surveillance strategies target marginalized groups like women, racialized folks, diverse community, and people in the so-called global south. Since unregulated surveillance amplifies the several violence that oppressed communities all over the world are already exposed. It is important to recognize that unregulated surveillance has been systematically used to harass, intimidate, diminish, denigrate the reputation of activists and journalists and human rights defenders all over the world. Companies that provide with surveillance tools profit from putting communities at risk instead of helping protect them. Meanwhile, governments are watching it happen with blind eye because there is not regulated intervention created by the states. Inevitably, that data will make their way into the hands of people who has the ability to use it against us. It is crucial to acknowledge that mass surveillance, it is not only a valuation in terms of individual rights. It is not just privacy rights, what is jeopardized, but the power of the states over the people. Surveillance technologies are often used to target human rights defenders in a bid to dissuade them from continuing their human rights work. The prevalence of the misuse of surveillance technology contributes to a chilling effect in which defenders are aware they may be targeted through these technologies and therefore may become fearful to continue their work. In the aftermath of the Pegasus scandal, several human rights defenders have reported to us that they are purposefully reducing their public-facing human rights work. The revelation about NSO Group and the Pegasus tool developed by the company have captured the world's attention because of the outrageous use against human rights defenders and journalists. Nonetheless, surveillance is nothing new. In Guatemala, the notorious case of transitional justice, the dossier of the dead, which is seeking justice for 4 disappearances during the civil war in Guatemala, contains more than 200,000 pages with details on surveillance information of more than 200 targeted people considered by the government in charge as opposition. All the people in this document were eventually victims of forced disappearance. However, 40 years later, just a few weeks ago, this case is on trial now, and the judge in charge is now being criminalized, and he publicly alarms us that he is under heavy harassment and state surveillance. It is essential that all the investigation published by Citizen Lab, Amnesty International, Access Now, and Frontline Defenders about Jordan, Bahrain, El Salvador, Mexico, Palestine, Colombia, Spain, Poland, etc., do not stay in impunity. Impunity will only guide us to perpetuate a system that has harmed us too long. It is time to break that cycle. I plead with you to be vocal about this reality as a significant issue. It is also crucial that companies like NSO Group, Circus, Celebrate, Palantir, etc., which develop surveillance weapons like Pegasus, IMSI catchers, DPI, man-in-the-middle tools, to be obligated by law to inform who they work with, their alliances, and their funders, and not to hide behind shield contracts. If we can recall, last week we saw the representative of NSO Group in the European Parliament avoid question for over 2 hours and repeat over and over that their mission is, quote unquote, save lives. In the last 8 years that I have been working for Frontline Defender, we start our sessions with a statement from the Rise Up Collective that says, surveillance is in reality a highly effective social control tool. The knowledge of being watched change our behavior and discourage dissidents. The impossibility of intimate association means that free speech is no longer possible. The impossibility of whispering means that any speech is not free of real or implicit coercion, and even more profound, omnipresent surveillance threats would wipe the most core element of democracy and social movement, the mental space for the people to make dissident and different points of view. In particular, we recommend that states place a moratorium on the export of surveillance technology by private security firms until regulation, which can hold surveillance technology companies accountable for their negative human rights impact, can be put into place. Call for independent and transparent investigation into alleged cases of target surveillance abuse. Hold surveillance companies accountable for their human rights impact by developing a legal framework which requires surveillance companies to conduct human rights due diligence to identify, prevent, mitigate, and remedy any human rights impact of the use of their products. This should be conducted before the sale or transfer of any surveillance technology and throughout any partnership with other companies and/or governments, and include liability for harms which are not properly prevented. Establish an independent mechanism with oversight of companies selling spyware to monitor, investigate the use, and ensure that use is consistent with human rights. Adopt legislation which mandates transparency on the sales and use of surveillance technology, including human rights due diligence process and outcomes. Ensure legislation adopted to regulate surveillance technology companies is developed in consultation with human rights defenders who have been impacted by the misuse of surveillance technology. Promote policies which enhance and strengthen and promote the use of strong encryption. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David, for your important apportations about the accountability and for the effects of surveillance on the civil society. Now we have the participation of Ana Colom from the Democratic Society. She is one of the sick persons. That is, thank you so much for to stay here this afternoon. She will talk about the impact of surveillance of the political opposition on democracy. Thank you, Ana. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Moltes gràcies. Bona tarda a tothom. I wish I would have been able to be here in person, so sorry about that. Just recovering, as Carlos said, from COVID. So yeah, I work for the Democratic Society. We are a non-profit organization. We have a headquarters in Brussels, but we are actually decentralized all over Europe because we feel we need to work grounded in the places from where we are or where we live. We connect citizens, residents with civil society, governments, political parties, etc., with a mission to improve and strengthen democracy and also to reimagine democracy for the challenges that we are facing. And this issue we're discussing is clearly, from what's been said already, really concerning with regards to democracy. It's this type of spyware is not only a threat to political opposition, but just to the fundamental principles of democracy. And there's a few reasons for that which have already been mentioned, but I'll just try and summarize key points that we think are quite concerning. So one of them is that it's being used systematically and at scale. We are not talking about isolated cases. As Jordi has said, this is the largest case, the Catalangate, known so far, but there's been research going over 10 years about how these technologies have been used. And we know now that they are not cases used by some authoritarian regimes, but actually used quite unashamedly, I would say, all over, including countries that we would call democracies in European countries as well. So this systematic use at scale is already very concerning, because it means that all these threats to privacy, assembly, information, freedom of expression are happening not in isolated ways. Another issue that has been mentioned, these technologies are spying on our contacts, so our friends, our families, so they are crossing traditional boundaries of what was the public and the private sphere, as well as geographical boundaries, as it has already been said, and as it has been the case with the Catalangate, for example. This also means it has a huge impact on the media. So this spyware accesses the contacts and conversations of journalists, which includes, for example, private sources that are so important for public interest and investigative journalism. And we know public interest media is a key pillar in a healthy democracy. So an attack on journalists as well as their sources can produce a really chilling effect. It's a direct attack on a key democratic principle. And let's remember, this is a technology that currently is entering our lives without any permission, even without needing to do anything. These technologies have now the zero-click capability, which means that you don't even need to click on a link, as it used to be the case before, for it to actually enter your phones, and as it's been said, your contacts, your conversations, your audios, anything. And this is clearly an abuse of power with no proportionality whatsoever. We're not talking about intelligence or spyware between two powerful states, for example. We're talking about massive systematic spying on people like us, as it's been said, human rights activists, lawyers, civil society, any citizen really. And some of the people who've been spied on it have talked about its chilling effect, about the sense that you're putting the lives of people who trust you at risk, the fear that spying on your activities can be used for blackmail, and how this is particularly risky, as David has said, also for oppressed groups, like women, racialized groups, LGBTQ plus groups, and especially in some contexts. So it's really a trespassing into the private sphere of citizens and the capacity to simply be citizens. Democracy means that each of us can organize, meet, mobilize, deliberate, be in opposition as well, if necessary. This is what democracy means. So it's about engaging society and state-society relations, and this spyware is producing a complete chilling effect on that. So, as it's been said, it's a clear violation of human rights, and this includes civil and political rights that are so fundamental in any democratic society. We've said the right to assembly, privacy, political participation. And then another point I also wanted to make is that this issue also illustrates a problem more broadly with digitalization and democracy, which is the power of private actors and corporations. And we've seen this already with the big tech, Facebook and Meta, Google, Twitter, and the power they are having really to dictate so much about our democracies without almost no regulation. And we are finding that in the absence of this regulation, these same corporations are the ones that are regulating themselves, but of course, very much in terms of their own interests. So, we've heard of lawsuits from some companies to NSO for spying on people who use their phones, like Apple, for example. But this means that it's not only technology that it's failing us, and I would say even more importantly, it's our own governments that are failing us until we start taking actions and regulating about these technologies. I would add also that this goes beyond this type of spyware and it goes beyond other surveillance, like the use of biometric data. But there's been more conversations about this recently. So I'll stick to spyware and how it adds another layer to this issue of digitalization and democracy. So yes, I think it's clear that we need to act. I would say there's different ways we need to do this. One is holding our own governments to account through all the democratic means that we have, getting in touch with our representatives, mobilizing, supporting civil society organizations that are already campaigning and raising awareness about these issues. There's, of course, accountability that needs to take place. and as I said, regulation. But I would say that there's also an urgent need for new agendas for civil society organizations. I mean, here we've heard from Jordi and David that are already raising and have been raising awareness about these issues. Omnium has created a guide about how to stay protected, etc. But I think the extent to which these technologies are impacting our democracies is so big that a lot more civil society organizations working on democracy or just engaging really on citizenship processes, even if focusing on other aspects of democracy. It's important we all include this knowledge about what these technologies are and how they are infiltrating our lives and what it means for democracy and how we engage with the state and with each other. So I think it's really important that we catch up really, because technologies are going faster than we are able to regulate, and we are being very reactive at the moment. So I think I'll stop here, and maybe we can have a bit more of a discussion later again.
Thank you so much, Anna. And now, we have the participation of Elias Campo from Citizen Lab. Well, he's in the side of John Scott, that is one of the other person that is with this moment in problems with health. Elias Campo will talk about the challenge and opportunities for accountability in mercenary spyware. Thank you, Elias, for your participation the last moment for this side event. Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'll read a couple notes that we have regarding the topic, and then we'll be available for some questions after the discussions or when the discussion starts. And what I wanted to convey very quickly is a quick summary of how things have been developing and some of the things that can be done to mitigate all these impacts of all the abuses of these types of tools. So government security agencies have had for decades a growing interest and appetite for digital surveillance. At first, only the most well-equipped, such as, for example, the US National Security Agency, could develop sophisticated in-house capabilities. That started to change shortly after the Arab Spring in 2011, around 2011, when some governments sought out ways to counter the digitally empowered civil movements that were challenging repressive regimes. Thanks to the growing number of surveillance firms, governments around the world, including those who were lacking domestic technical resources and capabilities of their own, discovered that they could effectively purchase their own NSA off the shelf. And at Citizen Lab, we're a University of Toronto-based research lab that undertakes evidence-based research on targeted digital espionage. We have identified hundreds of people whose phones have been targeted or hacked via these type of software and via these types of governments that have been using them. And the common denominator of our findings is mostly a powerful government-grade spyware manufactured by an Israeli-based surveillance company, NSA Group, and its flagship product called Pegasus, which we've been talking in these sessions. It's used by NSO Group's government's clients to monitor devices that are hacked, including intercepting emails, texts, even those that are encrypted, or even turning the device into a real-time surveillance device by turning on audio and video applications on the background. And what is also important to mention is that, however, is that NSO Group is just one among many companies in a growing marketplace for these type of surveillance technologies. The list of mercenary spyware firms that the Citizen Lab has reported so far include the Hacking Team, Gamma Group. Gamma Group is the parent company of Finfisher. Another one is Candiru, Cybarbit, Circles, and Citrox. And these are some of the ones that are known so far from some of the findings, but we also have to contemplate that there's dozens of other companies who have yet to be identified, and there are no doubt flourishing undetected, in spite of continuous investigations from organizations like Citizen Lab and Amnesty International. So reflecting on the urgency of the problem, some have advocated for an immediate worldwide moratorium on the sale and transfer of commercial spyware of these type of tools until safeguards are in place. But such a call is very unlikely to be implemented in practice. Illiberal governments are the least likely to cooperate since they benefit from the most of it from the existing Wild West marketplace. So a few things that can be done is, first, these governments should be more transparent and accountable when it comes to their own procurements, treating surveillance vendors with the same level of seriousness as some of the sale of most advanced weaponry. Governments should mandate that they will only contract with surveillance firms that meet a specific threshold of due diligence around human rights compliance, which can be measured with real-time data and independent oversight. Second, governments could tighten export controls to ensure surveillance vendors based on their own jurisdictions meaningfully comply with standards such as those outlined in the UN Guiding Principles of Human Rights. And third, governments could use existing regulatory measures to hold the worst offenders in this mercenary spyware industry legally accountable. In November 2021, for example, the US Department of Commerce added NSO Group and Candiru and several other mercenary spyware firms to its designated entity list of blacklisted companies. These type of efforts send a signal worldwide of which companies are abusing these type of tools against civil society. And lastly, legislation could open avenues for private litigation, allowing victims of targeting espionage to hold both governments and companies accountable. Currently, governments hide behind foreign impunity provisions, and vendors may avoid responsibility for harm caused by their products when used by government clients. Creating specific laws that would allow victims to sue both vendors and government clients in specific jurisdictions would increase liabilities for companies, investors, and governments operators alike. And likewise, technology platforms or infrastructure have been exploited by the mercenary spyware firms who litigate against those companies for violation of their terms of service or other damages. So these are the four directions that we think can be tackled to start off these abuses. And this finishes my intervention for now, and I'll be available for the next round of sessions or questions. I'm not sure exactly what we're continuing, but I'll be happy to participate in the conversation discussing these topics.
Thank you so much, Elias. We have some problems with the connection with the next participant. Jessica Sanchez, she is in Mexico and she has some problems. Well, we can turn to the second round, the second part of this side event. The idea is if all of you are some idea or something to say about the other participation, please feel free to speak about the topic that you want. But I want a question if for all of you, I don't know if it's possible some little reflection from your point of view. What you ask to the Human Rights Council in this topic, in this currently challenge for the human rights? What I don't know if you have some idea what can do the Human Rights Council to work in this specific topic. Jordi, if you want.
Ok, so first of all, Elias, hola, que abans no hi eres, no t'he pogut saludar. Gràcies per estar aquí. Thank you so much, Elias, to be there with us. It's a big pleasure because you as a professional, I think that you made a very also interesting job to denounce this the situation. So, and of course, thanks to the rest of the colleagues who discuss today with us. So, in terms of the Council, I think, and from our point of view, so means that for me it's clear that in a real democracy, guys like this will have provoked an independent investigation, at least in the Spanish Parliament. So means that. And also assumption of responsibilities, and means that right now, today, what Spain has done, it's nothing. And unfortunately, I'm quite sure that they will not do nothing, mainly because this is just the tip of the iceberg. And unfortunately, we are not talking just about the Spanish democracy. We are talking probably about a lot of different countries with a consolidated democracy. And so this is the reason why, for me, the international community, the European community, must decide if they want to accept this, or because this moves us in a worse scenario where the human rights and the democracy over the world will be always pending about the technology. And we are not talking about technology. We are talking about human rights, and we are talking about the consolidation and the future of the democracy. And if we come back to the case of Spain, for me, what is more critical and more dramatic is that the Socialist Party, once again, vote against one commission in the Spanish Parliament together with the far right, with the extreme right party. So it means that this is the scenario that we have, and so it means that I think that all the international institutions must take note about what happened in Catalonia, in the Catalan countries, and also in Spain, because as I said at the beginning of my intervention, so defend the human rights in Catalonia, it's the same to do, it's like to do the same in the rest of the world. So for me, the Catalangate as a big issue in terms of international impact, it not only affects Catalonia, it affects to the rest of the world.
Thank you so much, Jordi. David, if you have some reflection or some idea.
Thank you, Carlos. Well, something that I think it's very alarming is that we saw a trend in that each investigation that is published by Citizen Lab or Amnesty Tech or Access Now or Frontline Defenders look like at the time is the largest investigation in the sense of how many human rights defenders or journalists have been hacked by this kind of companies. And this trend is kind of telling us that governments are using most these kind of tools, and nothing is happening. None of the investigations have led to a transparency report from the states to publish why did they do that. So I think we have to keep pushing to be against impunity in this kind of cases, because it is very alarming. And I think it is important to say that this kind of companies that are actually getting a profit or was a business model, the use of vulnerabilities to find and use vulnerabilities in devices in a non-responsible way. They are feeding an environment that it actually will eventually harm us as a society. So I think it is important to acknowledge that and to keep pushing in order to these companies be accountable. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, David. Anna, is your turn. If you have some reflection of reply or comment something to the other presentations, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think all has been said, really. Yeah, I agree. It's not something that can go with impunity, because it's, as I said, not an isolated case. And as it has been said, it seems to be every time there seems to be just the tip of the iceberg. So this systematic use is a direct threat to our democratic principles, human rights. So all the tools that are at our disposal being the Human Rights Council, civil society, we need to use them to account, hold these actors to account. As I said, it's not only the companies, it's also the governments, especially, who are using and buying these tools.
Thank you, Anna. Elias, please.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly comment on a couple of things that I think are also important, and that these findings over the last few years are a snapshot or a glimpse of what potentially is also happening all over the world. And these are diagnoses of, in sense, organizations like Citizen Lab, Amnesty, we're diagnosing what's happening in the sense of where this is a problem that affects, undermines democracy and the way that humans organize for their well-being. And if we think about technology and the consequences that big tech has had in humanity overall, we've seen how some of the abuses or the misuses of technology have started to, in a way, downgrade humankind in terms of the ability for humans to focus and become addicted to these tools that undermine their ability to succeed in life, right? So, and we're evolving and we're understanding how technologies should be rectified to prevent these type of abuses. But in the same way that big tech and these social media companies have affected humanity in a way that's urgent for us to solve, and in order to be able to be more competent in solving other big challenges like climate, immigration, or other things that are more important and affect humanity. The tools of mercenary spyware are of similar importance that get solved, and these abuses get tackled and regulated, is because they're undermined by attacking and abusing our leaders in terms of government, civil leaders, civil society. They're attacking and they're undermining the basic fabric of democracy and how humans organize. So if these abuses happening on our leadership, we're also undermining democracy and our ability to succeed as a species and at a human global level. Another point that I wanted to make is that if you understand and you look at the arc of how technology evolves, when there's a big disruption of a product or a technology, first it's only accessible to certain elites, whether it's because of money or because of certain access. But as technology evolves, these products or disruptions are available to more and more people. Right, so if we follow what's happening in the mercenary spyware, we're seeing that there's more and more companies that are using these type of products that are the manufacturing and developing these type of products and selling them. So if there's no regulation or there's no action from our regulators and establishing legal frameworks, transparency, and how these tools can be legally used, we are potentially getting into a dystopia where any citizen would be able to buy or purchase or use these type of software against their partners, their family, their colleagues, or even their friends, right? So this is an important point. Another point that was also highlighted, or a glimpse could be understood and read from Ronan Sparrow reporting for the New Yorker on his interview with the NSO group, is that some of the evolution of these technologies and the processing of the data that is captured by some of these tools will enable in the future to be able to compute all the data that have been extracted from the devices that have been surveilled in order to compute and in a way calculate who should be targeted next. And that brings us to another type of dystopia from the one of the movies over the last 20 years, where people could be targeted before they're interesting for any of these governments, just because there has been an AI that has computed some of the data and concluded that that person should be targeted. And this was reported by Ronan Farrow in his reporting for the New Yorker in April. And I thought that was super interesting to see a glimpse of, if these mercenary spyware companies and tools are not regulated urgently, this is a type of dystopia that we can face in the near future as technology evolves very, very fast. And sorry, I went over my minutes, but I just wanted to convey these few points.
Thank you so much, Elias. Maybe you have another a reflection about the or.
Sorry, just to complement what the rest of the colleagues say, that I fully agree in terms that it's not only that also a dystopia scenario, but also the chilling effect. From my point of view, the chilling effect in terms of the other movements that exist over the world. If they know exactly how the countries, how the states, also how the parallel, let's say, organizations, not only NGOs, other organizations with no human values, let's say. I think that it creates a chilling effect for the rest of the movements over the world, and also can affect the good health of the democracy all over the world. So it means that for sure that we are in a very critical moment, and so it's very interesting to listen to the other colleagues. So thank you everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much of all one. Well, to the last part of this side event, only one, two general ideas. So we conclude by recalling that there are not good or bad technologies for the human rights, but rather process of creation, design, use, and application that intentionally or unintentionally can have a negative effects on the exercise and enjoyment of the human rights. But after this, all these presentations, maybe one thing is clear. If interference with privacy in the use of artificial intelligence application is already a clear violation of human rights, it's even more so when it is done illegally with the spy software, and even more so when it affects human rights defenders, journalists, or civil society, because it transgresses minimum values of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Thank you so much for the participations, Leah, David, Anna, Jordi, well, Jessica maybe after will know that. And thank you so much for your assistance for coming to this side event. We hope that the Human Rights Council put this topic in one of the principal debates for the next period of sessions. And well, thank you so much for all. Thank you for the people online. Thank you for people here, and thank you.